here the answer is we want to open up this side. So g4. And now all of a sudden, f5, ef5,
Check.
gf5, g5. Now all of a sudden, we got a passed pawn of our own on the king side. Yeah, so g4, g5, which is why black played f5. But now we have a passed pawn. And again, black is still completely stuck. Black is still completely stuck. So f4. And now, the brilliance of opening up the king side is revealed, because now queen a3. Now all of a sudden our queen is going to start swooshing, crisscrossing all over the place. So now our queen's trying to head to h3. And notice how black is still completely tied down by this pawn. Like, this queen can't really get back to help defend. So now all of a sudden, king d7, swoosh.
Check.
See how this queen just swept across the board in 2 moves? That's the power of the queen. So king c6, and now the very strong move, queen to f3, setting up a deadly discovery of some sort. So here, black plays king e7, the knight f6 check,
Check.
king e7, and now we're just going to win this pawn. So queen h5 now. So now we're threatening queen takes h7. Also, queen e8 mate is on the air. So queen takes b6.
Checkmate.
Checkmate is nice. So we're threatening multiple things. So queen e8 is also a nasty thing. So king e6 to avoid that, try to hide this way. And now the best way to win, knight d5. And now again we're attacking this guy. Queen e8 is in the air again. And this is pretty much GG. So king d7, again, stop queen e8. But now queen takes h7,
Check.
king c8, and g6. And now g7 and g8. Too many passed pawns. Too many passed pawns. All right. So in this one, principle of 2 weaknesses really was the key. Really was the key. Yeah. So let's go back to that position and one more time to see why g4 is so effective. Yeah, it's a really important principle. So yeah, I mean, the problem is you have to kind of realize that you've kind of exhausted your resources on the queen side, and you've made significant progress. I mean, like I said, these pieces are pretty much stalemated. But you can't really force anything further on the queen side. So really, it's kind of natural in a way to think, okay, well, what else can I do? And really, this king idea is not really the best. Once the king gets in too far, there's all sorts of, mating ideas for black even. If black is able to kind of like switch his pieces around, like get his knight to b7, like it might be easier to defend. So really, the only thing left is to play on the king side. So which is why g4 was so strong. And yeah, the simple idea of just playing g5 and securing an outpost on f6 for his knight, and then just winning h7, and then just queening a pawn. So yeah, g4 of king f7, g5, f5. Yeah, see the problem now is I can play knight f6, and this pawn is going to fall. Because you can't play king g7 because I have knight e8 and knight d6. So it's tricky. But yeah, I mean the point is also that when this front gets opened up, our queen is much more mobile than black's queen. So whenever there are weaknesses that creep up on the king side, our queen will be much more poised to kind of take advantage of it, because this queen can really never get into the game because of this pawn. So once our queen was able to swoop down to a3 and h3, it kind of spelled curtains for black. So okay, let's look at another example of something that is important in endgames. It might not be immediately obvious to you guys. So this is one of Aceric's favorite positions. Coming from a Haug of hedge proportions. So this doesn't really look like an endgame, but it's going to get into an endgame real soon. So. Okay, those are black's pieces. This is a typical hedgehog. Typical hedgehog position for black. Oops, no pawn in the background. It's not how pawns usually work. Okay. So what's the defining factor here, guys? This is position. So again, this doesn't really look like an endgame yet, but what's the defining factor here? What's the most important thing here? Hold on. What am I holding on for? Yeah. So what's the most important thing in this position? Yeah, but I mean, a queen trade's happening, so not exactly an attack on the king side happening. Yeah, it's not an attack. And development, sure. But I mean, again, that's going to change in a move or two. There's something that's a little bit more permanent. Pawn structure, no. I mean, 2 and 5 versus 4 and 3 is about the same. No, Mr. Tentacle hit the nail on the head. It's the space advantage. So white has a big advantage in space. I mean, it's a typical thing of a hedgehog, but the problem is here, black's pieces are particularly cramped. So it's not so much development as it is space. So basically, white's pieces will have more room to operate, which is a key in this endgame. So as white, what should we do here? If you have more space, you keep pieces on the board. Yep, I agree. But again, this is going to be an endgame, so. Okay, so first we play g5 to kick this knight and to gain more space. So now this knight has to kind of come back this way. So queen takes queen, pawn takes king takes queen, knight at d7. Okay. So we've gained a ton of space. Now what? You thought to avoid queen trade? No. Well, you couldn't really avoid a queen trade. This endgame is hard for black to hold. So first we want to take even more space, because some is good, more is better. So h4. So it kind of supports this pawn in case black ever wants to try to play, f6 or h6 or something. We don't have to worry about it. But also there's some ideas where might want to play h5 and g6, because notice that this pawn is somewhat weak. So if we can remove this defender of it, might be very strong. And he'd be very loath to play e5 because that creates major holes on f5 and d5. So notice that h4 prepares h5 and trying to play g6 perhaps, as an idea, maybe. But okay, so rook e8. And now we do want to target this pawn, so which rook? Doesn't really matter, I guess, because you're probably going to double anyway, but he chose the f rook. Because it's possible we might want to play rook ac1. It doesn't really matter, though. So rook fd1. And now the problem is for black that white can attack this pawn, which in and of itself isn't really such a huge deal. But the problem is it's really hard for black to kind of make his pieces harmonious because, like I said, there's always plans of this and this. There's plans of f5 maybe, just a straight up f5. So another reason why we played h4 is to defend this. Oops, is to defend this pawn on g5 so that we can play f5 in one move. And also we have an idea of maybe playing a4, a5, and opening up a front on the queen side. So we have a lot of ideas here, and really black is impervious. I mean, black can't really stop any of them. So he plays rook c7, gives rooks on an active file, rook d2, knight c6. Okay, so who said that? Who said if you have more space, you keep pieces on the board? Exactly. If you have more space, you keep pieces on the board, which is why when black offers a trade of knights, white says no thank you. Knight to e2, okay? So it looks weird to retreat this knight, but it's really important to keep pieces on the board. And really this knight isn't particularly well posted. It kind of disrupts the coordination of his pieces. Like now this rook is kind of stuck. This pawn becomes a little bit weaker because this rook can't really defend it. So by not trading, this knight is looking for happier home. And this knight is kind of silly on c6. So knight to e2. And now black is really trying to avoid a knight hop into e4, which would be kind of hard to defend this pawn on d6 then. So he tries f5 in order to keep white knights out of e4. But now the problem with this is white can open up a second front. So how does white open up a second front? Thanks to a space advantage. Anybody? So en passant is exactly what black wants. It kind of helps his pieces get free, right? Once this pawn is gone, that's exactly what black wants. So no, not en passant. But simple e4. Simple e4. So now the idea is if pawn takes, knight takes, okay, our knight gets e4. And we're simply threatening pawn takes pawn. And he can't really take back with this pawn because knight d5 is complete disaster. So simply e4. So rook f8, pawn takes pawn, rook takes pawn. And now our knight gets d4 anyway. So knight e4. So black tries to generate some counterplay, e5. Now this pawn falls, so knight d6, bishop d6, rook d6, ef4. And now we just simply bring our rook into the game and attack this pawn. This rook is doing a nice job. So rook f1, knight e7, knight takes f4, rook b7. So he wants to try to play knight c5 and defend this. And now what should white play here? So white is up a pawn here. So now what should white play here? Yeah, very good, Minty. So now that white's up a pawn, exchanging is actually going to make it easier to win. So knight d5, knight d5, cd5. Now notice this rook is trapped. So rook f1 is forced. King f1, a5. And now this knight is completely dominated by this bishop. This rook is stronger than this rook, and this pawn is a strong pass pawn. So king e2, king f8, and bishop d4. And now it's just a matter of technique. So b4, or wait. Oh, sorry, I missed a couple of moves. Okay, so a5, h5, b5, king e2, king f8. Now bishop d4. Okay, so now b4, king d3, king e7, rook a6, hitting this pawn. King f7, king c4, c7 check, rook c6, b7, g6, take, forcing the king to the back rank. King e8, d6, king d8, and rook a6. and here black resign. So every single one of white's pieces is completely dominating every single one of black's pieces. This bishop dominates this knight, this king is much better than this king, and this rook is much better than this rook. All because of the space advantage. It was very hard for black to kind of untangle his pieces. So white correctly